Democrats podcast, ladies and gentlemen. This is where we go behind the scenes to figure out the thoughts that animate the actions of those who make the arts. Today we have with us Anirudh Varma. He's got magic in his fingers and he's got music in his soul. He is, of course, the man behind the Anirudh Varma Collective. There's not only music there to shake your heads with joy, but also to bring pleasure to the mind as well, because there's a lot of considered music there. There's Indian rags that fuse with Western music, and it's absolutely phenomenal. If you haven't heard it, we highly suggest that you listen to the new stuff that Anirudh has come up with, which has been marinating in a way for more than 2 years. Yeah,
it has. Yes,
excellent. Thank you for joining us, Anirudh.
Likewise, it's great to be here. Thank you for calling me.
So tell us first, of course, about the new music that has been sort of palpitating in your heart for so long, and now finally it's out.
Yes, so we've been working on this second album now for 3 years. The two tracks which came out recently, last 2 months, have been worked in the works for 2 years now. And we felt it wasn't ready for some time, and then with our producer Anirudh Varma, we finally felt that now it's the correct time to bring it out. So every month we're bringing out one track. October was Bhimpalasi, last month was Chayanat, and this month we have a third track coming out.
Wow, what's it? What's that?
That's called Bihag, and that's a special because we also have a dancer collaborating with us on this one.
So yeah, all of these, if I'm not mistaken, are also the names of rags that the songs are based on. Yeah,
yes, they are.
So this, of course, perfect time to get straight to the beginning. So where did this obsession with music begin?
So I come from a family of lawyers, but also musicians.
Right.
So, and my father's side of they've all been lawyers, but they've also been musicians. My grandfather, he was a professional vocalist and a harmonium player.
Wow.
My father's a tabla player. But they all took up law as their career. But music was in the family, and then when I was 5, I was playing with my grandfather's harmonium. And so then one of my uncles was like, maybe you should train properly.
Right.
And later I found out that my great-great-grandfather founded the Prayag Sangeet Samiti, Major Ranjit Singh.
Wow.
So I suppose classical music was in the family, and I think it came to me at a point where I was able to appreciate it more, around class 7, 8.
Right.
When before that I was pro-Western music, and then suddenly there was a turnover into listening to classical music as well. So that's how that's how the musical journey began. And then I've been training as a pianist for the past 21 years or so.
Wow.
And then my mother has been after me has been encouraging me to look at academics from a musical perspective as well. That's when during my master's is when I wrote a paper, which is what the collective is now, in my first semester of my master's. So it was actually a research paper for a band or an ensemble itself.
And this was master's of what?
So this was a master's in performance studies from Ambedkar University.
Fantastic.
So that sort of opened up my horizon in terms of what can be explored in performance and music. And that's how the collective was actually formed in the first place. And then 2016, the idea sort of started brewing, and then 17 we began working, and 18 the first album came out.
When you started learning music was probably not seen as a profession, maybe an art or a sadhana or something, but
yes, I mean that time this question about how will you survive in the music field, and that, I mean, when I was younger, that question wasn't in my head, but as I when I entered university and finished college, that question did began to
of course
come into my mind. So I think the collective, fortunately, has not just been a live act, but also outside the live act, we're working on productions. And that's what I felt pre-COVID, that I figured that you can't survive only on live performance, because 2 years it's just not been there.
Of course.
And so fortunately, all of us, I sort of connect with like-minded musicians who were also keen to explore outside the live space, and that gave us time to explore our own music and grow together as well.
For sure, for sure. There's of course also this thing about the fact that most of the music now is consumed over the internet on
Correct.
social media, which is becoming a bit of a platform. And there's a lot of talk about the fact that attention spans have sort of shrunk. Classical music, on the other hand, is something that takes a while to actually even develop.
Absolutely.
I've heard some phenomenal stories of one rag being stretched through the night, and the sadhana of just one note.
Yes.
How do you reconcile these two worlds?
The aim of the collective was always to present classical music in a contemporary yet rooted way, where the rag is not being diluted under any circumstances. So we have, there are, even though today people, like I said, attention spans have reduced, so the 3 or 4 minute track exists, but for us somehow, we didn't want to let go. So we have some tracks in the album which are 11 minutes.
That's right, yeah.
And we question did come up with that, maybe reduce it. I'm like, it won't come out, you won't feel the same way at all. And fortunately, till now, that time issue hasn't happened. I mean, people are fortunately still appreciating the music.
Right.
I also feel it's how you're presenting it. I mean,
Sure.
even if it's a longer track or a longer song, there are ways to keep the audience engaged. If the arrangement is as engaging throughout,
Sure.
I don't see why they would not listen to it. But of course, I mean, trends have changed. Instagram reels have come in, which have just they're good and bad, pros and cons.
For sure. There's also, I think, there needs to be a little bit of expectation management where you need to know who you are actually targeting.
Correct, absolutely. I think over the years we've been focusing on who is the audience,
Right.
And for me, the thought was that we've always known that classical music has been, say, for a niche audience, but we wanted to put it out for everyone.
Right.
And we were lucky, and I think the way it was presented, people came to us and said that we haven't heard classical music before, but we really like this. So we went back and heard the traditional version of the same composition.
Sure.
That made me feel like, okay, there is something in this, so let's keep working on it, because it's difficult. I mean, it's difficult to understand. The difficult part is who's your audience.
Of course.
And fortunately, we've sort of managed to make our music reach out to everyone. And I mean, of course, everyone has, someone likes coffee, someone likes tea.
Of course.
I can't force that, but we being ourselves, and
I think, do correct me if I'm wrong, but we used to have our icons when we were growing up and
Correct.
listening to the music, etc. Currently, I think the democratization of art has happened so beautifully that everyone is willing to experiment with everything
Absolutely.
and make a star out of whatever they like instead of what the legacy in that way is.
Correct.
Right?
Absolutely.
There's also the fact that classical music is also considered in a way, like as I said earlier, sadhana. There's a whole ritual also involved. Have you had to face for lack of a better way of explaining it, raised eyebrows or frowns from the classical side of music for what you've been doing?
So interestingly, that was something that we were curious rather, that how will the purists take it? And we were fortunate that some of the purists, such as Pandit Bhunesh Komkari, is also on the second album.
Wow, okay.
And even so, after the second track came out, Pandit Sajan Mishra actually gave us a call that this isn't fusion, you're doing it the right way, so keep doing it.
Wow.
When
That's huge.
That was, and I wasn't mentally prepared for that call at all that day.
That's a doyen actually calling you.
Absolutely, and we were. I think because the intention was that we do it in a contemporary, means in today's way, in our way, but we keep the rag and the tal and the bandish as pure as possible. We don't want, like, we try and the classical musicians in the compositions aren't moving away from the rag.
Right.
And that, I think, clicked because we wanted people to understand and get used to what the rag and composition is, but yet in a way that they can sort of take it in as well.
I think the other important part, of course, is the education of it all. No, I mean,
Correct.
the fact that to make music, I think education is a little important, which seems to be going into the background a little in today's world, where the final product is taking over rather than the process of making the final product.
Correct. And I think education in general, the pedagogy of performance in music and the arts in general, is important just to know what you're exploring.
Sure.
It's you can. I've fortunately gotten the opportunity to work on my grades and while as a pianist.
Right.
But it's always interesting to step out of that grammar if you know it. And then that becomes more exciting because you know what you're stepping out of.
Sure.
So, which is why it was so important which is why I said 2 years it's taken, because rags like Bihag and Chayanat and Bhim Palasi, I felt I needed time for it to grow into my system before I touch it and make an arrangement out of it.
Sure.
And that's what we've tried to do, because even all the musicians over the course of 2.5 years, they've also grown, worked on their art, understood how they can grow musically.
Sure.
And as people, and that I feel has shown in the final recordings. I mean, we were pleasantly surprised at how they're executing those parts now.
Of course. There are a lot of people who are now seduced by the glamour of music and want to make it a profession.
Correct.
Not understanding that there's a lot of sweat and a fair amount of tears as well. What would you have as advice for people who are stepping into the world of music?
It's the glamour is what you see from the outside, but there is the only advice that I have for myself and for people who are entering the music industry is that patience. You have to be patient with yourself, the art, and your song, because it's become so easy to put material out in on platforms that newer artists take no time, done a demo, and they put it out. But spend time with your music. Also, keep in mind that there is struggle from at every second nook and corner, and that's how it is. I mean, the struggle is important for you to feel good about it, because it doesn't happen in 1 month. It takes years for you to reach where you would want to reach.
Absolutely.
And
and there's a treasure trove to mine in our own heritage as well, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, I don't think writer's block or creative block is something that you can get if you mine it right, है ना?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we all have. I personally have had a lot. Like compositions have been on hold, but there's also something good about that, because you let it be for some time.
Sure.
If it's not moving ahead, give it some time. Come back to it, because maybe you're not in the correct space of mental space, or the mind isn't there.
Of course.
And it's good to give it a break, come back to it, and see where it's. I mean, it'll sound different. I mean, I always say that today's Rag will never sound the same tomorrow, because you're feeling differently.
Absolutely. And that, I mean, music at the end of the day is feeling, right?
It's feeling. If you can connect if you can touch someone with your art, good, whether it's you're feeling happy, they feel sad, but if they're feeling something, that connect is so important, I feel.
Then I think music has sort of served its purpose.
Correct.
And feeling is, feelings are some things that have come to the fore in these COVID times, haven't they?
Correct.
I mean, we've been speaking to a lot of musicians, and the one thing that has come out is this whole thing about the fact that now consumption of music per se has become a very internalized exercise. People are listening to it in their bedrooms with their headphones on. People are also making that music in their bedrooms and living rooms. So it's become a very internalized, and I think the community experience of music, on the other hand, which is to actually go on stage, have people in front of you grooving to the music, etc., has sort of, people have been missing that. The musicians have been missing that. Where do you stand in this dichotomy?
So when COVID happened, we knew that performance is on hold, and there were already online concerts happening, but we took up. There were a lot of them happening. At one point, there was just too much happening.
Right.
And we took up about 2 in total, because then the question was, why are we doing it?
Sure.
And the feeling of performing together, that wasn't there for the longest time. But that also gave us the opportunity to work on new material and also explore. So we began a session called Quarantine Sessions, which led me to explore artists within the collective who are, let's say, younger and they're backing vocalists,
Sure.
but they never come in front. So I push them that, come get some material, let's work on something. Also led us to explore artists across the country and outside India, because everyone's busy with them, but this time they all had the time. So,
Sure.
but then when we came back on stage for JLF
Right.
in February this year, that experience was like I can't tell you what it felt like, because we weren't our tightest, but the feeling of being together on
Sure.
one stage.
Of
I think
course.
nothing, that feeling of community, like you said.
Absolutely.
Nothing. I think nothing else, you can't really match that.
And you think the future is bright for live music on a stage?
I'm fingers. I don't know how to jinx it.
Of course.
I hope, fingers crossed, that touch wood with every coming month, and hopefully maybe by mid 22, end 22, things should get back.
Sure. There's also this whole thing about classical music is dying. People aren't really interested. It's a bit of an anachronism of our times, etc. On the other hand, there's a whole generation of young musicians who are very proudly bearing the classical music flag and taking it forward. So, what do you think finally is the future for classical music, for the roots, for heritage?
So like you said, there are a lot of pure classical artists as well, solo sitar players, tabla players, who are doing it as in the pure form as well. And that's so good to see, because you see that people are actually still pushing themselves in that genre. And then, unfortunately, we are also in that genre. I mean, we love classical music, which is why we're in it.
Of course.
And that thought about it is dying has been there for years now, but the archive will not die until the repertoire is constantly being re-explored.
Sure.
So today's classical musicians who are inspired, say, by Ustad Vilayat Khan,
Of course.
today's sitar players, influences from him, but their way. If that legacy carries on, and if classical purists are willing to share their repertoire with the upcoming generations, I see no reason as to why it will die off.
That's fantastic. Absolutely. I think a living entity is an entity that evolves constantly.
Correct.
So
Correct. Exactly.
That's very beautifully put. That of course, Ustad Vilayat Khan is a legend, but the legacy that he has left can only be taken forward if that legacy is nourished by new thought.
Absolutely.
Finally, if you were to be asked what the art that you practice is to you, how would you describe the art that you practice?
The art that I practice, well, I think for me, art is the only way I can express myself without feeling judged. Because just be myself in that moment. Good, bad is subjective. If I'm feeling happy, anger, love, anything, it's me in that moment, and I'm just being myself in that moment.
That's beautifully put, because I think music is about making the moment beautiful.
Absolutely.
And of course, you've made many of our moments beautiful with the fantastic music that you've been making.
Thank you so much.
Of course, if you like the music, there's always the internet to go to. Can people find your music anywhere on the internet?
Yes, we're on Spotify, Apple Music, all the platforms, and YouTube. We have all our.
And you haven't a fancy spelling for your name? Is it
only... No. We are the Anirudh Varma Collective. ANIRUDH. Varma with a VA. That's the only...
That's important. That's why spelling is important.
Absolutely. That goes wrong since school. So I'm so used to it. But no, I think...
Brilliant.
You can catch us on all the platforms.
Absolutely. And there's fantastic music to be heard there. Anirudh, this has been brilliant.
Likewise, it's been a pleasure, Sarthak. Thank you so much.
And thank you for the music, and thank you for sharing the thoughts that animate the music. That's extremely important.
Thank you so
much. Thank you for being here. If you do like what we do, remember to follow us. Teamwork Arts Podcast. Just search for it, and wherever you find us, just hit the follow button. That'll do for us. If you, of course, we all live for validation. If you like what we do, please leave a comment as well. That'd be really, really nice. Thank you very much for listening. And what's coming up next? Well, for that, you'll just have to stay tuned. Teamwork Arts Podcast.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, subscribe to our channel now. We have a new episode out every Friday.